think there may be issues where the user creation may not dovetail well with the mass market. Right? It may be that to be a mass market product, you need to be strongly curated and entirely professionally made. Also the other thing I'll say is, and I think this is true for IMVU, that the content creation that has gone on has been very much in themes that have been established, usually by us or by another IP, or it's easier to snowball off of something that's been established. So it's not like you could just you guys had to build avatars to start out with, right? You had to have some frame of reference where people could iterate from.
Yeah. Excuse me, do you have a question that relates to what they were just talking about? Okay, please.
Could you give a general proportion of what is user created and how much items are user created and are available, and how much is created by
IMVU?
Okay, the question is, give a ratio of how many of the items in the inventory are user created and how much are created by the company. Lee?
Right. So we have well over 3 million items in our virtual goods catalog, and there's probably under 1,000 that are actually created by IMVU. So huge, majority are goods that are created outside. Our system is that at one point, IMVU created a set of initial products, like here's a basic T-shirt template, here's a basic, room frame, and from that, users can derive those basic items into other products, and we have a whole derivation chain that allows for proper payment of credits when some item is sold, for those credits to be paid out to users that are in that derivation chain. So the original creator gets some, but also somebody who derives from that will get their cut, and it works well that way.
Okay. I'm going to do 2 questions to the panel and then turn it over to the audience. The first is for Daniel. I'm going to return to you, though Lee and Patrick should feel to jump in. So for people who are in the games business, as opposed to the virtual goods business, what would be a couple of pieces of key advice that you would give them in terms of upscaling their virtual goods income in the next year?
I think being, and this goes across the board, not just for virtual goods, but being very metrics driven, we are not been great at this, but we are getting a lot better. So for example, with Puzzle Pirates, it's only really been in the last year that we've become very careful about getting good metrics on what we're doing, and then driving our development and kind of rollout of new items and so on against those key metrics. And so now we're in a point where we can kind of look at a new item and predict, like, we're going to make hopefully this much money from selling these kinds of new items over Halloween, and kind of meet those predictions. And that's, I think, you can go it's the rabbit hole, but I would encourage diving down the rabbit hole and having people who are entirely focused on analytics and kind of driving your feature development and your product management, using analytics as a key part of what drives it, rather than, basically just making it up as you go along, which we were very good at. The other thing.
Can you illustrate that with the comment you made at dinner last night about the PMs, how PMs and engineers are organized as the most successful players in this?
I can't repeat that.
Okay, sorry. If you get Daniel drunk, it's worth asking him the question.
But that very tight cycle of like try something, measure it. And the second thing I'd say, and I sort of meant to mention this at the beginning when we were talking about the difference between West and East, is certainly there are some companies, particularly in China, I'm thinking of ZT Online, that have been incredibly, for want of a better word, I'm trying to think of a polite word, but I'm just going to say ruthless, basically. And kind of putting aside for a moment, it's a very interesting debate that I like to have, but putting aside the sort of ethical debate about what you're doing with games and with virtual goods, I know who saw the Goldberg report the other day with Quedit on it. It was pretty funny. Selling virtual stuff that you don't need to kids, good business. The thing that I would say there is, you need to decide that line yourself, but certainly there are people who have pushed the line in some ways and been incredibly successful. And so, by all means, have a moral high ground, but understand that by by trying things, you will discover that people will happily engage with activities like treasure chests in ZT Online. Does anyone know how treasure chests work? Should I explain how they work? It's basically a slot machine. You buy we find a treasure chest in the world, and you spend an amount of hard currency, real money, in order to open the chest, and you get a ding, 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 and you see the different valuable rare items that you might get, and then it settles on a not very valuable rare item, and rinse and repeat. And there are other stuff on top of that, like for example, there's a daily prize for the person who opens the most treasure chests, which is an extremely rare and unique item. And they actually had to scale this back because the Chinese government was getting rather upset with them. But this was a huge revenue driver. I mean, like tens of millions of dollars. Giant, I think, has $1 billion market cap, or it did at one point, entirely driven by this game, which, you know, a substantial part of it was driven by this one single mechanic. Another example, I mean, they've really pushed the envelope in a few ways, was they did broadcasting to the whole game, cost a certain amount of money. Then the next person that broadcasts, it costs twice as much. And the next person that broadcasts, and in a game where you're fighting each other and want to, you know, slag off the competition, you got this escalation, and people just spent and spent and spent. And again, these things, you know, I looked at them and I was like, really? They did that? And I'm like, and they made a lot of money. And so you have to decide where.
And it does work, and things like this does work. To tie this together to Lee's point about Simple, the most popular game in terms of revenues in Italy from 2003 to 2005 was Guess the Number. I have now explained half the rules to the game with the title. The other half is you had to guess the lowest, the only other part is to guess the lowest unique number. That was the whole game. It generated over $100 million in revenues. So Daniel's describing a phenomenon. By the way, as a cautionary note, since Daniel's opened a Pandora's box, I was asked for advice by the executive team of a fairly successful virtual goods company, and one of their competitors was getting better results than them because that competitor goes beyond the ethical bar that most people do. And one of the very bright members of the group said, "Why don't we do that?" I said, "Because you're not as good at being unethical as they are. So if you sell your soul, which of course we are recommending against, you should not sell your soul and do it badly because
be good at it, right? Yeah.
Patrick?
Actually, why don't you
go
go
ahead.
first?
No, I was just going to say, as far as the, you know, what other things are critical for rolling out a virtual goods strategy, I would say the freshness of the content as you're doing it, whether you're doing it in-house. And one thing I was going to add to what you're saying about doing it in-house is you get to preserve a visual look and feel that actually has plenty of benefits for the user as well, and there's consistency there, whereas we have sometimes an overwhelming flashing array of all kinds of stuff. But with that, whether you're doing it in-house or you're doing user-generated, is making sure there's that constant supply of new things, because people are people. There's the shiny new thing syndrome that's out there all the time, and the more that you can get some different things out there for users, it definitely keeps them coming back for more. It's just similar to the treasure chest.
By the way, Patrick, with my apologies, I want to get to the audience, but I want to, since the title of this said virtual economies, and you can you in 90 seconds give some highlights on virtual economies, and then I'll turn it over to the audience?
Sure. So I think the key thing about virtual economies, I think as we talked offline about what we think Facebook will face, is the fact that it's a supply and demand issue for currency. We in Korea have figured out really good ways to get supply of currency into the system. We can do things like credit cards with rewards for just currency, virtual currency. We can do things like gifting through mobile phone, virtual currency. And we can do things like just your credit card rewards, converting them into currency. But what we're not so good at is
loyalty
programs, right? And so it's imagine taking your Amex rewards and turning that into coins. What we're not so good at, and what we're trying to figure out, are the syncs. So interestingly, in the social networking world, there's a lot of ways to spend money, but not enough ways to spend money. And so we're turning to gaming, actually, as to figure out how to create more syncs. So people who bring the gaming expertise to social networks, I think you're going to have an opportunity in Facebook to bring those gaming type strategies to really help Facebook make more money, and you'll make more money as well. Now